It is the Prep Red Zone Oklahoma Preview Show for week number 2. I'm your host, Michael Knight. We welcome you into this week's edition of the Preview Show. I'm also the director of Prep Red Zone Oklahoma. And man, the 2025 football season is in full swing, and we've already had some big time results, big time outcomes across the state of Oklahoma, and it continues this week. So here's a look at what we're going to do here on this week's edition of the Prep Red Zone Oklahoma Preview Show. We'll be taking a look at the 10 best games in week 2, and man, we have some good ones. And because I can't control myself and I can't contain myself, I'm not limiting it to just 10. We also take a look at 5 more games that you should pay attention to this week. And then we'll dive into our coaches interviews, and we got 3 more fantastic coaches that are going to be coaching in some of the best games this week, headlined by Broken Arrow head coach Travis Hill as his team takes on Mustang in their home opener on Friday night. We'll also be joined by Corey Cole, the head coach of the Sulphur Bulldogs, following their huge win over Washington last week. And of course, they have another rivalry game coming up on Friday night against Davis. And then finally, we'll be joined by Hominy head coach Caleb Christian. And similar to Coach Cole at Sulphur, they got their season kicked off with a big win last week, but they have a huge rivalry game coming up on Friday night. So we'll talk with Travis Hill, Corey Cole, and Caleb Christian here on this program. Then we'll also dive into the top 10 players to watch. The week 2 players to watch. You can check out that article right now on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma, but we'll talk about them here on the preview. You'll also see plenty of highlights from all 10 players to watch going into week number 2. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a couple things. We'll answer your questions. Again, you can send in your questions. Tweet at us, DM us, email us. You can tweet at us or DM us at Prep Red Zone OK. You can email me, Michael at prepredzone.com, and we'll answer those questions right here on the show. We got a couple good ones for you to wrap it up. We'll also take a sneak peek at our Player of the Year watch list. That comes out on Thursday on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma, but we take a sneak peek at the 3 new players that will be added to this week's edition of the Player of the Year watch list. We've already done week 0, week 1, so we have 6 total so far. We're adding 3 more as we do each and every single Thursday on the website, but we take a sneak peek at those 3 additions right here on the Prep Red Zone Oklahoma Preview Show. And then finally, we will wrap things up by telling you what you can expect from the website. We'll have coverage of, I believe, 3 different games on our social media platforms, as well as right here on the YouTube channel with game highlights. And then, of course, we'll have articles up on the website as well, taking a look at some of the top performers from the games that we covered on Thursday and Friday, respectively. Then this weekend, we'll update our team rankings as we do each and every single Saturday as we head into week 3 from 6A1 all the way down to Class A2. We'll update the top 10 rankings heading into week 3. We'll also take a look back at week 2 with the week 2 roundup. You can expect that on Saturday night. Last week, it was delayed until Sunday. I had a wedding to go to. I apologize. I don't know who schedules weddings in the fall. That's just me. But that will be out on Saturday night. And then we finish off the weekend with our week 2 top performers. This last week, we had nearly 30 different players recognized on our top performer feature. Again, we want to remind you, if you have a top performer submission, you need to get that information to us before noon or 1 o'clock at the latest on Sunday for that player to be featured on Sunday afternoon with the top performer article. Again, you can DM us, tweet at us on Twitter at PrepRedZoneOK, or again, you can email Michael at PrepRedZone.com. We want to keep bumping that number up. We want 30 players. We want 40 players. We want as many players recognized for the great things that they're doing on Thursday and Friday nights, respectively. All right, now let's dive in to the 10 best games of week 2. And we got some rivalry games all over the state. I'm pumped for this week's slate. In fact, it's one of those weeks where I couldn't just pick one game. I'm going to 2 games on Friday night because of all the great matchups across the state of Oklahoma. I'm also throwing in a Thursday night game. I'm trying to see as much football as possible, and we have some good games, some good matchups coming up here in week 2. So let's take a look at this week's 10 best games. Again, you can check out the article on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma, but this week it's kicked off with Jones at Bethany. You have the Jones Longhorns, who are one of the top teams in Class 2A1. They could be a serious state championship contender in that class. They've been knocking on the door over the last several years. They go on the road to take on Bethany. The Longhorns, they've been playing great football so far. They're 2-0 on the season. They looked really good in their opener against Luther. Then they played a tougher team with Kiefer last week, and they continued to dominate. So really impressed with what the Longhorns have shown here early on in the season. But they take on a team with Bethany that is one of those teams in Class 4A that is just always good. They're always a consistent, good team, and the Longhorns haven't had much luck facing Bethany over the last several years. So this is the non-district finale for Jones, for Bethany. They're trying to stay in full swing in Class 4A. 4A obviously very top heavy with Elgin and Tuttle at the top, but Bethany is one of those teams. Like I said, they're always good. They're always competitive. They lost some key players in the offseason due to transfers. They're both now at Mustang, but they still got some guys. They still got some really good players. They're going to compete. They're going to play some hard-nosed football. Really interested to see what happens in that matchup because Jones on paper looks like the better team, but as we know here in Oklahoma, that rarely means anything. The better team on paper, sometimes comes up short. But the Longhorns, I really like what I've seen from them. Really looking forward to seeing Bethany and seeing how they try to hold Jones and specifically the Longhorn offense that has been able to score at will here early on in the season. Moving further south, you have a city championship on the line as Lawton takes on Lawton MacArthur. And I got to tip my hat to Lawton head coach Lorenzo Williams because the Wolverines are on a roll. They beat Enid and Lawton Eisenhower to start the season. Now look, this matchup against Lawton Mac is certainly a tougher test than what the Wolverines have faced early on in the season, but they got a running back that is having a breakout season. Again, it's only 2 games in, but so far he looks fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do against the Highlanders, who are also looking to capture that city championship. They beat Lawton Eisenhower. They stumbled out of the gate, losing to Elgin 42-21, but look, watch Elgin this season. They're one of the best teams in 4A. That doesn't make Lawton Mac any lesser of a team. A lot of teams are going to lose to Elgin this season, but I really like what the Highlanders have. Obviously, they're headlined by 2 D1 commits with Joshua Rushing and Adam Austin, but at the same time, this is going to be a great matchup. Lawton Mac is one of those top 10 teams in Class 5A. Lawton High is knocking on the door of being a top 10 team in Class 5A. And I mentioned it 2 weeks ago on this preview show, how Class 5A is so more wide open. It's deeper. There's more competitive teams. Lawton is a perfect example of that. You look at the top 10 rankings right now in Class 5A. Lawton High isn't in there. Maybe they should be. Maybe they will be if they take care of business against the Highlanders on Friday night. Going to the Tulsa area, we got another fantastic matchup featuring top teams in Class 2A1 as well as Class 3A. This is one of the games that I'll be at on Friday night. Metro Christian going on the road to take on Cassia Hall. Metro Christian off to a great start this season. Offensively, that's the headline with them. Kincaid Ing, their quarterback, has gotten off to a really good start. They've taken care of business in the first couple of weeks, but this is a huge test as Cassia Hall has to be playing with a lot of momentum right now because they lost their season opener against Holland Hall, and they really just did not look good offensively. They lost by 3 touchdowns in that season opener, but then they bounced back by going on the road and taking down Rejoice Christian. Now, I will say full disclosure, Rejoice was not at 100% in that week 1 matchup, but nevertheless, Cassia Hall's defense looked fantastic. They played great. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in this matchup. Can Cassia Hall's defense do it again and limit what can be a very explosive Metro Christian offense? That should be a great game. Can't wait to be there. The other game that I'm going to on Friday night is in Broken Arrow as the Tigers have their home opener. They've made back-to-back trips over to Northwest Arkansas to take on, last week was Fayetteville in an overtime classic. They also had their season opener over in Northwest Arkansas. Now they return home and they host the Mustang Broncos. And I'll tell you, this is one of the more intriguing matchups of week 2 just because you hear for, the 8 months from January to August, all the talk about move-ins and transfers and player movement in general. And when you look at all the different teams across the state, Broken Arrow and Mustang probably have the most new faces on their roster, the most, marquee players that they've added to this season's roster. So now they go head to head. I'm fired up to see it. Mustang had their season opener last week against UConn. They took care of business, although star quarterback Jaden O'Neal left in the third quarter with an injury. Don't know the update there. They're not going to tell us. We'll find out on Friday night if he's ready to go. As far as Broken Arrow, I mentioned they went to Fayetteville last week, suffered a tough overtime loss to the Bulldogs. That's a Fayetteville team that's going to contend for the largest class state championship. They won state championship last year, so that's a Fayetteville team that is going to be right back in the mix again as one of the top teams in Arkansas. Losing in overtime, it happens, and in the big picture, it's not that big of a deal. Broken Arrow coming into this matchup, finally getting a chance to play in front of the home fans for head coach Travis Hill. We'll talk with him about that aspect of this matchup later on here in the show. Another huge matchup in northern Oklahoma. You have the Hominy Bucks hosting Pawhuska. And I'm going to start with Hominy because I just got a chance to see them last week. They took care of business against Cleveland, and now they have a much tougher matchup as they face their rival from Pawhuska. Hominy looked really good last week. They have a really nice senior class. They also have some underclassmen, some sophomores that I was really impressed with. We'll talk about one of those sophomores later on in the show. But can they keep up with Pawhuska? This is another game that on paper it looks like it could be a high-scoring matchup. It could end up being who has the ball last ends up winning. Hominy trying to turn things around in this series against Pawhuska. And for Pawhuska, they've been dominant so far this season. Head coach Matt Hennessy, he has it rolling. And speaking of teams that have a couple new faces on the offensive side of the ball, the Huskies certainly have that with their quarterback, Kane Foreman. But this is a team that looks like one of the best in Class A1, facing one of the best teams in Class A2. Two teams that could significantly contend for the state championship in their respective class. Now they go head to head, and it's a great non-district matchup. We're going to learn a lot about those two teams. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a high-scoring affair. Another rivalry matchup in the smack dab middle of Oklahoma. Maybe it depends on how you look at it from a map perspective. You have Perkins Tryon taking on Cushing. Cushing looking to bounce back after a tough loss last week. Perkins Tryon has looked really good so far this season. I got a chance to watch them in the preseason in a scrimmage against Jones, and Perkins Tryon really looked good. I was really impressed with them. I know they have a lot of experience coming back, and this is a big opportunity for them. They're in that district with Sulphur, and Sulphur looks like a team that's going to, just absolutely bulldoze their way to the state championship again. That district matchup is in week 4. So Perkins Tryon is trying to pick up some momentum. So once district play starts and they face Sulphur, they'll be ready to go. And there's a huge way to pick up momentum if you beat your rival in Cushing. Cushing, like I said, trying to bounce back from a tough loss last week. They've been in some close games early on. So if this ends up being a close matchup on Friday night, Cushing might have the advantage because they've certainly been battle tested so far this season. Going back up to the Tulsa area, you have the Owasso Rams hosting the Sand Springs Sandites in a 6A1 versus 6A2 matchup. Owasso desperate to get into the win column. They're 0-2 to start the season after making it all the way to the state championship game a year ago. But look, Owasso's schedule was brutal. You knew that coming in. So starting 0-2 obviously wasn't the plan, but at the same time, you have an opportunity to pick up some momentum before taking a week off and then opening up district play after that. For the Rams, they lost to Bixby in week 0. They let one slip away against Jinx last week. This is an opportunity to bounce back. On the other side, you have Sand Springs. They got absolutely shelled by Bixby. Don't care. I don't care what happened in that matchup because most everybody is going to get shelled by the Bixby Spartans. It's what can you take away from that matchup. It's what can you, erase and fix and bring into this next matchup. Head coach Bobby Klink has talked about playing these two games specifically to start their season, he's going to know exactly what he has. After playing Bixby and Owasso in back-to-back weeks, he's going to know what he needs to do, as they wrap up non-district play against Bishop Kelly. Then they go into the district season. They're trying to finally kick that door down and contend for the gold ball, and they get another chance to, throw themselves into the fire on Friday against the Owasso Rams. Sulphur and Davis. I mentioned Sulphur. I mentioned head coach Corey Cole coming on later on in the show, and it's one of those matchups where Sulphur is coming off arguably the biggest win. Arguably, I'm throwing that word out. They're coming off the biggest win of week one as they snap Washington's 45 game winning streak. And do you have time to celebrate if you're the Bulldogs? No, you don't, because you have to go on the road and take on Davis in a huge rivalry matchup down there in Southern Oklahoma. You go from playing the defending 2A1 state champion to facing the 2A2 state champion. We'll talk more about that matchup with head coach Corey Cole. But for Davis, they opened the season with a huge shutout victory over Pauls Valley last week. And, you look at their championship season from a year ago, this was a Davis team that started 0-3. They faced a tough non-district schedule. They face a tough non-district schedule again this season. But Davis is a team that, as long as Dax Owens is at quarterback, this is a team that has a chance to make some noise and contend and possibly defend that state championship. This is a huge rivalry game down in Southern Oklahoma. Looking forward to seeing what happens in that one. Another rivalry matchup. It maybe has lost a little bit of luster. The Backyard Bowl between Jinx and Union, and I never thought I would say that as far as losing luster, but Union stumbling out of the gates with an 0-2 start. But the thing that I'll always say, and look, this is a cliche in all of sports, when you throw the record books out, because the record books don't matter. I think that's one of the lamest cliches in sports, but at the same time, you really have to throw the record books out when it comes to Jinx and Union. Just when you think you have an idea of what's going to happen in the matchup, you have no idea, and the opposite happens. Last year, Jinx looked like the better team. Union beat them in the regular season. Jinx came back and beat them by 5 touchdowns in the playoffs. So you never know what's going to happen when these two teams step on the field. But on paper, Jinx looks like the much better team in this matchup. We'll find out Friday night as Union heads on the road to face the Jinx Trojans. The first road game for Union this season, the first home game for Jinx this season. And then finally, wrapping up the 10 best games, you have Vian going on the road to take on Kiefer. This is a matchup of a top 10 team in Class 2A1 and a top 10 team in Class 2A2. For Kiefer, they got to bounce back. They lost in a big way to Jones last week. Now they return home to face Vian. And this is a Vian team that looked really good last season. They looked really good in their season opener last week against Eufaula. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens here. I think Vian's going to take care of business, but Kiefer, that's a talented team. And if Kiefer's able to beat Vian, not only does that make Kiefer a significantly, more impressive team to watch in Class 2A1, but what does that say about the Jones Longhorns? Because Jones just took care of business against Kiefer. And for Kiefer to bounce back with a win over Vian on Friday night, that makes 2A1 a little more interesting as we start looking ahead to district play and, who are the serious contenders in each class. All right, so I gave you our 10 best games. Let's wrap up this portion of the show with 5 more games because, again, I say, what's our 10 best games? I can't help myself. I always include 5 more, 3 more, whatever it may be. There's some really big weeks coming up. We might just do 10 more. We might just do 20. I don't know. There's no rules. 5 more games to pay attention to. First, Blanchard at Newcastle. Newcastle looking to bounce back after a tough loss last week to Tuttle. Newcastle, they got a huge win in week 0. I think they should take care of business this week against Blanchard. Blanchard, they opened their season last week. First win for head coach Lance Manning, who took over as Blanchard's head coach this offseason. Interested to find out what happens in that matchup between 5A and 4A. You have another big game in Class 3A, Bristow at Berry Hill. Both of those teams coming off of very close ball games last week. Berry Hill able to take care of business against Fort Gibson. Bristow able to take care of business against Cushing. Both of them had to survive in the final minute. to get the wins there. So now they go head to head. Really looking forward to that one. Down over in the west side and in southern Oklahoma, you have Ringling hosting Cashin, a rematch of a state championship game from several years ago. Cashin has looked good. They had to survive overtime, I believe double overtime with Velma Alma last week. Ringling has looked good. They took care of business against Atoka in week one. So, a traditional rivalry matchup between those teams that have, experience of facing each other in the state championship game. Now they face each other in the regular season. Another matchup in the smaller classes, you have Tonkawa hosting Fairview. I don't know much about Tonkawa. We're going to find out on Friday night as they host Fairview. Fairview has completely proven me wrong. I talked about it on last week's show. Fairview, they come out and dominate Alva in the first week. Then they come out and beat Kingston, a top 5 team in Class 2A1 last week with a game-winning field goal as time expired. So Fairview has completely proven me wrong. That's a team that can contend in Class A1. And now we'll find out more about Tonkawa as those two teams go head to head. And then finally, Lincoln Christian plays another game that you have to pay attention to. They'll head over to Arkansas to take on Shiloh Christian. This has turned into a fun matchup between Oklahoma and Arkansas. You have several of those interstate matchups. But Lincoln Christian off to a fantastic start. They took care of business last week against Heritage Hall. Now they look to go to Arkansas to take on Shiloh Christian and come away with a big win to wrap up non-district play. All right, so that's a look at 5 more games. That's a look at the 10 best games of week 2. Let's get into our coaches conversation now. And we start with Broken Arrow head coach Travis Hill as he joins the program on the Prep Redzone Oklahoma Preview Show. And coach, I'm interested to see what happens this week as you guys started the season with back-to-back trips to Northwest Arkansas. You go 1-1 during those back-to-back road trips. Now you get to play in front of the home fans. The first home game of the season, first opportunity to not have to get on a bus to head out of state or just head on the road in general. What are you expecting from the fans on Friday night, and what should be a very fun atmosphere for Broken Arrow's home opener?
As you well know, Michael, and you ask those questions because you know what an activity, what a festivity, what an event, and any other language I can use that Broken Arrow puts on at their home football game. So expecting a big crowd, Hall of Fame night, and also the jungle gets the opportunity to put on a show for the first time in the 2025 season. So exciting times and looking forward to it, Michael.
Now let's talk about those first 2 games. 1-1 to start the season. Looked really good in week 0. You go back over to Arkansas last week, face a really good Fayetteville team, come up just short in overtime. Look, that's a team that's going to contend for a state championship again this season. We're only 2 games into the year, but what have you learned from your team through the first 2 games, and even throw in the preseason scrimmage as well? What have you learned about your team here in early September?
Very excited about them. First of all, we see that our ceiling is high. We got a great opportunity to be a very, very good football team. We're not there, Michael, like most teams aren't after game 2, but we got to clean up our own act in both events where we're getting evaluated, obviously not referring to the scrimmages, but just the true evaluations that started 2 weeks ago. We played well in a lot of aspects, been with some consistency issues, both sides of football, the kicking game, all 3 aspects of what we do on Friday nights. Still has a few deficiencies from a coaching standpoint, player standpoint that we got to correct in order to be considered a championship type football team. So that's what we're working on diligently to correct our own errors and putting all the emphasis, especially through the non-district games, on ourselves as much as we are putting on the emphasis on the other team.
Friday night, you guys host Mustang, and it's from an intriguing matchup perspective. It's got to be at the top of the list, considering all the new faces that Broken Arrow has, both on the sideline with the coaches as well as the players. Mustang brought in a lot of new players as well. Their roster looks very different from last season, but I want to take a more big picture step because, look, you've been in this business for a while. You've turned programs around. What has the last 9 months been like, because you're bringing in a whole new staff at Broken Arrow? You have this unbelievable mix of talent between returning players and new players that are trying to gel together. Comparing it to turning around Muskogee, turning around East Central, what has the last 9 months been like for you and your coaching staff at Broken Arrow?
Yeah, me and Coach Wilson talk about it all the time. It's a whirlwind. It's a new, I don't want to say problem, a new issue, a new something to deal with on a daily basis, and that's just part of being new. Even though we have now been here since January, it has been a whirlwind. Basically, our kids, that's who we care about. That's who we're bringing together. I've really liked the way this has come together. When you come into a program and they've struggled a little bit to the last couple of years, there's that interjection, the new era we're in of a little bit of a new roster, so to speak, players coming in. So I think it's been a real good fit. So I compliment both sides, the kids that have been here and the kids that came in. They have really gelled together. You got the whole thing about a football team, and which I still think is the uniqueness about the game of football, is truly the team concept and the chemistry of what you do. I think that's with every sport. It's a team sport, but the numbers are so big in football that it can be more difficult to deal with. So I've really appreciated the way they've been non-selfish, the way they've gone about their business. But everybody was explained that before they came, that this is the way Coach Hill's going to work. And I'm not into all that stuff. We're into winning football games, and I think that's what collects interest, not stats, not this, winners. And I think we got a bunch of winners, and I think they both are going to feed off each other as we continue to grow together and develop our chemistry. And so very excited about it. And it is slowing down, Michael. So we don't have to come here on a daily basis and find the 15 new little things we need to deal with today. We're starting to get into a little bit of a groove. And I think that's helping not only us as a staff, but obviously the kids too, getting into a routine and sticking with it.
You mentioned earlier how you're not where you need to be right now. And look, again, it's only week two. Still talking about early September. And the beauty is these games don't, and in the big picture, they don't mean anything. Obviously, you want to win every single week. You want to have more points than the other team. But as far as district standings, playoff seeding, all that big picture stuff, what happens on Friday night has no impact on that. You mentioned not being where you need to be, but at this point in the season, it's still early, still non-district play. Are you where you thought you needed to be or should be at this point of the year?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being realistic, I mean, we got this excellence and commitment to doing everything right. So to say, like I mentioned, this we're not even close yet, okay? But to be realistic about from a head football coach standpoint, with the being new and everything else, I'm really happy with where we're at. I mean, we're competing hard every day. We're learning how every day counts. We're learning how to win and how to prepare to win. I think that's the key. How do you win? We start off with preparing to win and thinking that's what you're doing. So Monday through Thursdays, we're gaining momentum on what we're trying to get done and how we're going about our business. I said we're getting into a routine. So, yes, to answer your question, excited about where we're at, probably where we should be as far as being realistic. But as I've also mentioned, Michael, we got a lot of inner working that we need to just get better at. And like I said, I think that will continue to be that way. And people on the road is good and bad. You get rid of some distractions, but you've got some other ones. And now here this week, we got a different set of distractions being at home, as we kind of mentioned beforehand, good distractions, but yet distractions. So it'll be interesting again in a growing experience with our kids and our staff to be able to work through this effort and continue to get better.
Let's talk about the Mustang game. Let's talk about this matchup. I so appreciate your time for joining us. And in full disclosure, Coach was in the middle of some film studies. So when you're breaking down the Broncos on film, when you're watching what they do, and they only have one game under their belt, a big rivalry win for them last week against UConn. When you look at Mustang on film, I mentioned all the new players that they have. Obviously, a very talented quarterback, some very talented skill players as well. What stands out to you, and what's going to be one of the biggest keys to getting a win in front of the home fans on Friday night?
Yeah, it's an interesting group to watch, and they're very similar. A lot of new faces. Of course, I know some of those faces from where they came from. I don't do well with names. I have a hard enough time with our 100 that we have here at Broken Arrow. We're getting better at that, by the way. But I can tell you, I'm going to give you some numbers. Obviously, the O'Neill kid, the kid that came in from California, their quarterback. Number 2 is this very special football player. We got a chance to watch him in the spring too. Throws the ball as well as anybody in high school. I mean, I think he's an athletic kid. Reminds me of the kid that played for Michigan, a big kid that can run, chooses not to. He's more of a pocket kid. But has a rifle for an arm and puts the ball, it's catchable every time. Very, very, very. He's a Florida State commit. I don't think we have to say a whole lot more. Okay.
Right.
Um, they've now surrounded themselves with some kids that can do special things with the ball when they get it in their hands, and so they look pretty simple. Lee may have something else for us on Friday night, but as of right now, pretty simple, pretty vanilla. But I really think that's the way he wants it, because it is really just getting the ball into some great skilled kids' hands. The two brothers that are over there, they're both juniors. Again, number 1 and 14, apologizing for names, but doing an extremely good job offensively. And then you scatter these 3 defensive backs they got in there, number 33, number 3, and number 5. Number 5 is a specialist, the kid that came over from PC Original. Very, very special athletes. You see them every once in a while dot over there on the offensive side of the ball. You better know when they're in, okay? So they really do a great job up there. I think this is a game that, concerning for us, that we've got to win both trenches. That's probably week in and week out. It's kind of a stupid comment, but it's not. It's the truth, and this will be huge here, because I think our skill kids are going to kind of X each other out. Both sides have some good skill kids, and I think they will kind of do so. Who's going to win the trenches? Who's going to be better there? Will give their best opportunity to win that football game.
Coach, I'm going to let you get back to it, get you back into the film room. Thanks so much for sitting down with us today. Looking forward to seeing what happens on Friday night and then throughout the rest of the season. I know there's a lot of excitement in the Broken Arrow community and around that Broken Arrow football program. So it'll be a fun atmosphere for sure on Friday night with the first home game of the season. Thanks so much again for your time today. All right.
Michael, appreciate what you and Prep Redzone do. Thank you, and you guys have a blessed day.
He's Travis Hill, the head coach of the Broken Arrow Tigers. Now moving on to Sulphur head coach Corey Cole, who joins us now. They got a huge win last week against the Washington Warriors as they snap Washington's 45-game winning streak in the process. And Coach, I got to start with taking us into the community. I got to think that despite the fact that you guys have a huge rivalry game this week against Davis, the community has to still be buzzing after last week's win against Washington.
They've been buzzing, and they've been anticipating that game for quite a while. When you fall just short, and you got some of the players we got returning from last year, you look forward to that. But our community understands the game of football, understands what's at stake, and what's great about it is they know that that game, all we want to do is get better. Like in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter until week 4 when we play Perkins. That's why we schedule the Washingtons and the Davises and the people like that, because we just want to get better, and our people understand that. And not gonna lie, I mean, those are games you should play in non-district if you're a pretty good football team. And we learned a lot about it. We were fortunate enough to win, but we learned a lot about ourselves. But yes, our community is buzzing, and now they are excited and ready for Murray County War this Friday night.
Before we get into the Davis matchup, I would be a fool if I didn't say the name Maddox Mobley roughly about 20 times during this interview. I knew he was good. Watching him in the semifinals in person last year, and then again the following week in the championship game, it was pretty clear that he's one of the best players in Oklahoma. And yet I still think even though I believe he's that, I still think he's underrated across the state. He is the perfect example of a player that flips a switch. The first 3 quarters, he was somewhat quiet offensively, defensively, and then even watching it in person and then looking back at the film this weekend, I can't believe how many plays he made in the fourth quarter, time and time again, big play after big play, offense, defense, it didn't matter. I just want you to talk about Maddox Mobley because I was incredibly impressed, and more people need to be talking about him.
He's the most dynamic player that we've ever had at Sulphur, and we've had some absolute studs here at Sulphur, but he's the most dynamic. He's so committed to the program. He is one of the hardest working young men we've ever had. And the thing about him, he's also the alpha leader, and he is a servant leader. You should have been at weights yesterday afternoon on Sunday afternoon. That he wasn't talking about Washington. He was talking about the Davis Wolves. He's ready to go. He's just a gamer, and he's just a great young man, just a great representation of what a high school football player should be. But and I'm going to be honest with you, it was like that on purpose the other night because he's been nursing a little bit of an ankle injury, and I knew that if we were going to win that football game, I had to have Maddox Mobley in the late third, fourth quarters, and didn't know he was going to go do what he did there. But we were kind of cautious. I didn't want him to be spent early on, and first game of the year, he didn't scrimmage in either one of the scrimmages. And I think that's what you saw the other night. He was ready to go show what he could do and get the ball in his hands. But he's just dynamic. And like I said, he's just one of those guys. He's just different. He's playing a new position on defense and play. I wish I'd have moved him there, a long time ago because he looked comfortable back there. He's always been a linebacker. And he's just a great student of the game, a great representation of what you want in a student athlete.
Yeah, real quick, just running down some of the big plays for those that missed the game, and we're going to be showing highlights over this. Washington scores a touchdown. They need the 2-point conversion to make it a one-possession game. It's Mobley who breaks up the pass in the end zone. Uh, Also defensively, he gets the game-clinching interception there with less than 2 minutes to play. On the last offensive drive, you have 4th down and 3, I believe, inside the Washington 10. You don't take a field goal. You don't take the points. Hey, let's go up 2 possessions and try to put this thing away. It's 4th and 3. Mobley gets the first down. And don't think I didn't remember last year's state championship game. He came up inches short on that 2-point conversion. This time, he didn't come up inches short. He got the first down. And then a couple plays later, he runs in the end zone for the touchdown to put you guys up 2 possessions. Just a huge performance all the way around. And then, another guy who had a big performance, Bridge Barrett on the defensive side of the ball. Really loved what I saw from your entire defensive unit, but Washington quarterback Creed Barrett is one of the better quarterbacks in the state, and he can slice up defenses very easily. But his cousin Bridge had his number a little bit on Friday night as he came up with an interception and several pass breakups on several big plays, especially early on in the matchup.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Bridge Barrett, you talk about Maddox Mobley being underrated because first of all, Maddox Mobley he can play D1 football. He's just not 6 foot, 6'1", whatever. And he's a gamer. He's gonna make whatever program better because he's gonna go and do it the right way. We know Maddox Mobley. Bridge Barrett is very underrated. He's one of the best cover corners around. He had 8 interceptions last year. That doesn't happen by accident. He always is on their best guy. He followed Case Alexander everywhere he went. And Case Alexander had a great football game, but we kept him under control from making the big plays. You know what I'm saying? I just thought he was as very underrated. But like our defensively, our game plan this year was no big, huge plays, and really the biggest play was we missed a tackle on a run. Josiah Dickerson had a big run there, about a 50-yard run, and we had him. We just missed a tackle. But our deal in the passing game was keep everybody in front of us, Bridge, make plays, keep Case under wraps. And we didn't give him the home runs in the pass game. And that's what beat us last year. And that was kind of our focus going in. But in your opinion, what was the best Maddox Mobley play?
Best Maddox Mobley play. Man, that's really hard because all the plays that I just mentioned were so huge within their own way. I think poetic wise, as a guy in the media, I like the 4th down conversion
Yeah.
just because you can bring it back to last year's title game and coming up inches short and hey, let's go put the game away right now. And he was able to get the first down, and then of course the touchdown. But I can't overlook what he was able to do on defense.
Running
Again,
and not to cut you off, but running the same play that we ran for that 2-point play. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like
that's
I told
that's
people all along, I was like, if we ever get back in that situation, if we're giving it to 4, running that we're going to run out, well, I'm going to put it back in his hands when the game's on the line. But I thought that obviously the 2-point play was pretty impressive because he kind of got lost in the traffic, comes out of nowhere. But when Creed Barrett had the edge, it looked like he was going to have a big play over on their sideline, and from his safety position comes up and hits the guy out of bounds for a 2-yard loss. Like,
yep,
that's a dog. That's a
yep.
dog. I mean, he just had a great game. But guess what? We had a lot of guys have a great game, and we can talk about Maddox, and he don't want to hear about himself. He wants to hear about those offensive linemen, those defensive linemen. He wants to hear about Kel Brakefield in his first game going back against his former teammates. You know what I'm saying? He's not a guy. He's a guy that if we would have won 28-19 and he had 4 or 5 tackles and, he touched the ball 5 or 6 times, he just wants to win. He just wants to win.
Yeah, it's clear that you have a team that is full of those kind of players. And, talking about the entire defense as a whole, it's a great lead into my next question because we got to talk about Davis. We got to talk about this week's game. It is our preview show. We're previewing the biggest games this week, and you go from facing one defending state champion to another with the Davis Wolves. Obviously, this one has a little more importance because it is a rivalry game. Your defense was incredibly aggressive, incredibly relentless on Friday night, but now you're playing a Davis team where it's not about being aggressive, it's not about being relentless, it's about discipline when you're facing that option attack. How do you prepare for Davis and find that balance between staying as aggressive as you guys want to be as a defense, but at the same time playing disciplined football and knowing your assignments when you're facing a team where you mentioned preventing that big play? You miss one assignment and boom, gone. Dax Owens going 60
Yep.
yards to the house. How do you find the balance between aggressive, relentless pressure and disciplined football?
Well, the good thing about it is we play Davis every year. So when I say, I'm not saying it's an advantage, but for us, is like we work on it so hard. Our kids know what we're going to try to do. They know the schemes, and it's got to be, you got to be very, very disciplined. And but that's the way our program is. Weights every morning, 6:55 in the morning, weights on Sunday afternoon, film on Sunday afternoon. You know what I'm saying? Everything is structured. It's a tight regime, and it's very structured. And to me, that's where the discipline comes into place. And it's a different, and our kids can handle, like, hey, this week it's going to be, Maddox Mobley. You've got four. You know what I'm saying? You got their number four. He wants to go outside, that you go get. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those deals. You just got to be extremely disciplined. Got to play different than what we did last week. And but as far as preparation goes, our kids, they know the game plan. They know what they got to do. They know who's got the fullback. They know who's got the quarterback. They know who's got the pitch man. They know who's got the back out if he wants to leak out. They know that. Now, it's still easy to fall asleep when it's just play after play after play. And I will say this, they're throwing the ball way better this year than they have in years past. And, I told some other day, the other day, I was like, they're playing with confidence, and they're playing with a togetherness. You know what I'm saying? They've got a unique thing going over there. Coach Parker obviously does a great job every year. And I truly say this with a lot of respect. Like, I want Washington and Davis to be state champions. I do. I want them to be state champions. I want to play those guys every year, but they play us every year. So I root for them, later on. Now this week in Murray County, the only two schools playing football in this county, it's a different beast, this week. And our kids are excited for it. They really are. And I know it's only Monday morning, but they are chomping at the bit already. They were buzzing yesterday afternoon and buzzing this morning in the weight room. They're excited about the opportunity.
Look, it's only week 2, and this is probably not anything that you want to talk about, but I can't help but talk about the big picture when it comes to Class 3A. And you guys in Lincoln Christian played an instant classic last year in the state title game. With all the starters they have coming back, with all the starters you had coming back, it was easy to put you guys 1 and 2 coming into this season. And so far, look, it's only week 2, but man, you guys look like the top 2 teams in Class 3A. They beat Heritage Hall with ease on Friday night. You guys take care of business against Washington. How much do you look at the big picture and the rest of Class 3A and, start peeking at what Lincoln Christian is doing? Because I got to be honest, Coach, again, it's only week 2. You only have 1 game under your belt, but man, it looks like you guys are on a crash course for a potential rematch in December.
Love Coach Ricky, love their program, but I'm gonna be totally honest with you. There's no looking forward whatsoever. It's Davis, then it's Cash, then it's Perkins, who's sliding through there. They're a top team in the state. They got a lot of guys coming back. They're a great football team. Bristow knocked off Cushing the other night. Great football team. Seminole knocked off Shakota. We had a really tough district. It's going to be competitive week in, week out. And so it's just, you gotta look at it one day at a time. We talk about that. We want to be the best version of ourselves every day, every practice, every weight room session, everything we do. If we can do that, then we'll have the opportunity to talk about what you're talking about. But we got to earn it. You know what I'm saying? We can't, nothing's going to be given to us. Nothing's going to be handed to us. Just like we talked about the other night, great game, game of the week. It lived up to all the hype. But there was no trophies given out. There was nothing given out. At the end of the day, Coach Beller, who in my opinion is the best coach in the state of Oklahoma, and his coaching staff love those guys. He would tell you the same thing: win, lose, or draw. Both teams found out a lot about themselves and got better. And that's what we're trying to do day in and day out in everything we do. So like I said, yeah, you can say what you want to, but man, it's a long ways away. And we got a lot of big games before that. So no looking ahead. It's Davis right now. It's Davis 100, 110%. And that's our focus.
I knew that'd be the answer, but look, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask the question. I'm telling you, man, it looks good. Both of you guys look good. I was, I mentioned the, on the field before the game Friday, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I was so looking forward to the game on Friday night. It was such a fun experience to be down there in Southern Oklahoma and watching a great football game between two perennial powerhouses. It was a blast. I enjoyed it. And thanks so much for joining us this morning, because you go from one
So,
defending champ to another. It's going to be another big week there in
so was that
Sulphur
your
as you guys
was
get
that
ready
your
for Davis.
was that your first experience on the banks of Rock Creek?
Yeah, I've been to a practice. That was my first game. That was my first game. I know I've been down
Was it
there
not
for a
nuts?
practice in the past.
Was it not nuts there?
It was great. I mean, that's what it's everything that I expected. Two small, two football driven communities. I was expecting it, and it lived up to the hype. I
Awesome.
tweeted about it a couple of times. It was a heavyweight fight coming in, and it felt like it throughout. It was outstanding.
Yeah.
It was outstanding without
I
saying.
just want to say thank you, not because we're on this show, but thank you for what you're doing for high school football. Thank you for trying to get Oklahoma high school football from small schools to big schools. Everybody, getting us out there and publicizing us, man. You do a phenomenal job, and we really appreciate that, Michael.
I appreciate that, Coach. And again, thanks so much for your time, and good luck against the Davis Wolves. And discipline this week. Don't let Dax Owens go for 60 or 70 yards in the blink of an eye. And you're right, he
He
can
can do
pass
it.
it a little bit, but
He can do it.
it should be a fun game Friday for sure.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, now we're moving on to another head coach joining us here, and they got a big rivalry game this week as well. Hominy head coach Caleb Christian, they got their season kicked off last week with a big win over Cleveland on the road. Now they take on Pawhuska. That's a top 5 team in Class A1, taking on the Bucks, who are a top 5 team in Class A2. And Coach, we got to start with going back to last week. Big rivalry win last week on the road against Cleveland, as you guys were in a tight one there for about a quarter and a half, but then you were able to pick up momentum and start running away with it in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. Just really, anytime a rival game, you really ever know how it's going to shake out. And, fortunate for us that we've been on the better end of it here lately. And so, yeah, just knew that it's going to be a tough one. They're better than they were, a year ago. Coach done a good job with them in the off season. Kids are obviously bigger, faster, and stronger. They got a quarterback that's young, that's going to be really, really good in a few years. Played really well for a freshman the other night. And then, ultimately, I think our leadership and our experience kind of wore on them a little bit as we got going, just because, these guys here have been in some big games and some big moments over the last couple of years, and it's nice having them as seniors now.
You mentioned seniors. You mentioned their quarterback. You guys have a really good one, Blaine Hipp. I talk about and I write about prospects all over the state, and there's a lot of underrated kids. There's a lot of guys that should get more attention that just aren't. Blaine Hipp is near the top of that list, in my opinion. You watch him in person, you watch him on film, and it really doesn't matter if he's lined up at quarterback or receiver earlier on in his career, what he brings to the defensive side of the ball. Blaine Hipp has really impressed me, and he impressed me again. It was a complete performance from him on Thursday night against Cleveland on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he definitely passes the eye test. I was fortunate to go with him on a couple of college visits, being there for him. And that's the first thing, is when he rolls up, even around those college, those 19, 20-year-olds, he still passes that eye test at being, 17 years old and looking like that. And then I think the biggest thing for him is I think the saying of he looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane, is always a popular quote for football. And he doesn't fit under that category. He looks like Tarzan, plays like Tarzan. Very fast, physical, wants to chase the football, wants to, pursue, likes to hit from, you don't see that a ton from quarterbacks, playing outside linebacker. And then, lastly is you can't coach effort. And you can just tell he just loves playing and plays with great effort every time he's on the field.
Look, this is, you said a quarterback that loves to hit, also plays linebacker, plays for Hominy. I'm not saying that he's the next Zaven Collins, but I am saying he's underrated. More schools need to be looking at him. He, like you said, he passes the eye
Yep.
test. Really impressed with what I saw again on Thursday night. You have another player that's up and coming, really special senior class, but there's a sophomore that people need to start looking for, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Malachi Harris. He got a lot of run last year as a freshman,
Mhm.
but I really like what you do with Harris offensively because it's very clear that he's a playmaker. Whether it's at
Yeah.
running back or wide receiver, he can make a lot of things happen with the football in his hands, and it's clear to me that he has a very bright future.
Yeah, absolutely. We've always just tried to hang our hat at Hominy at figuring out who are some of the notch above guys and the difference makers on Fridays, and just try to give them the ball as much as we can. And he falls into that category as a freshman. Jackson Woods, was in that category, no matter the age, and just running back. We could slip him in at an H back. The far receiver, the X spot or the Z, the guy that comes in motion. He really can do it all just because we want to get him in certain matchups. And you guys can, obviously see he's got just that next gear. He's got a natural kind of jump cut, patient when he's carrying the football. That is very deceiving. But then you get him in the field and just looks like he's a touch faster than everybody. And you can't coach that stuff. We can, get him in the position and all that, but making guys miss and getting in the open space and being savvy enough to find the grass in certain areas as a route runner. And he's already got that as a sophomore. So a really bright future. And he's had a really, that's the thing too, is a lot of, all the inside stuff people don't really see, but, we had a come to Jesus meeting, if you will. And he responded the right way back in April-ish. And really since then, whether it was at Summer Pride, and I actually was just over there with him at the high school, talking to him. And, you can just tell he's wanting to take that next step of, being a well-rounded player in everything he does.
Now, you guys have been knocking on the door of, competing for that state championship. We mentioned Zaven Collins earlier. He led you guys to the last state title about a decade ago, close to it.
Yeah.
You guys have been knocking on that door over the last several years. What's different about this year's team that could allow you guys to not knock on the door anymore, but kick that thing down and contend and possibly win a state title this year?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. Like you said, to win a ton of ball games, had some undefeated, regular season, getting to the semis a few times, and the quarters. I think the biggest thing with this group is, like you just said, having that experience of not knocking the door down, and just that sick feeling leaving. The one that comes in mind is Hooker had a really good ball team. And that was Jackson's senior year. I thought we had the right pieces to really win it all that year. And we've had, the year before, Gore was unbelievable. I knew that was, we could play those guys 10 times and never beat them, just so tough. But I thought that next year, and I think the kids knew it too. Kids are smart. They can pick up. Now you go into every game, with confidence, but kids are smart too. They look around at what everybody else has. And so the biggest thing for this group is they were eyewitnesses of that. And a lot of them played, and a lot of them knew that, man, we've got to play our best ball and come up with the certain plays and the discipline. And it's, it can't be a light switch thing where you turn it on and off and just magically hope that it goes in your favor. Man, you just got to do the right thing all the time. And then you're still promised, not to win it, and because, like I said, Jackson's year, we lost up there 27-24 at Alva. I think it made a sick feeling for everybody. And, last year, graduating that huge group, and we knew we had, a bunch of juniors, and they fought like heck last year. But I really think this year, the biggest ticket is they've been there and we haven't knocked the door down, and they know what that feels like, what it tastes like, what it sets in on you in the off season. The coulda, woulda, shoulda. I gotta have this one play back, and so I think they're going into a mindset of wanting to fix all that and play with a passion, a discipline that finally ends up getting them to the mountaintop.
Well, in addition to this week being a rivalry game with Pawhuska, it's also the perfect measuring stick game because in the big picture, it means absolutely nothing towards like district standings, playoff seeding, stuff like that. But you're going to know a lot about your football team after you play Pawhuska with everything that they have coming back, and plus some new additions. They have some new faces on this year's team, most notably the quarterback. Talking about this week's game with the Huskies, when you watch them on film, what stands out to you?
Oh, the first thing is they play so hard. And I think Coach Hennessy has always done a great job. I think that's, what we've always talked about when we're in our office, that he knows how to rally kids and get them playing with their hair on fire. And so, man, it's so evident. They love the game. They're not out there. It's not a hobby to them. It's not something they just casually do. They're passionate about it. And like I said, bar none is how hard they play for each other and how physical they want to play. That's the first thing that stood out. Then you mix that in with some good pieces up front and then some playmakers, in the receiving game. Then goes to show why I don't even know what it's been, 120 something to 6 or 0 or whatever it's been, a couple touchdowns maybe, in their games this year.
Well, Coach, like I said, man, really great win last week. Was happy to be there and see you guys in person early on in the season. Really impressed with the guys that you bring back. And again, you've been knocking on the door, and I think that there's a good chance that you guys kick it down. Class A2, definitely going to be more competitive last year. Your district rival, Woodland, I mean, they were hands down the best team last year. I think it's more wide open this year. I think it's going to be very competitive from start to finish. But thanks for joining us this week, and good luck on Friday as you guys welcome in the Huskies.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
He's head coach Caleb Christian of the Hominy Bucks, and now we move on to our next segment featuring the Week 2 players to watch. And in Class 2A1, you have the Jones Longhorns, who are off to a 2-0 start this season. They got a big game this week against the Bethany Bronchos, and look, you can't start talking about the Longhorns without bringing up their quarterback, Asen Hansen. He's off to a great start, and he kicks off our Week 2 players to watch. Asen Hansen has had a really good start to his senior season. He comes into this year as a very experienced playmaker for the Jones offense. And one thing that I wrote about this week was the fact that his efficiency as a quarterback has taken the next step. He's a dual threat weapon. There's no doubt about it. He can hurt a defense with the pass game. He can hurt a defense with the run game. That's been apparent so far this season. But the efficiency so far this year has been outstanding. So now, as he goes and takes on Bethany this week, I'm looking forward to seeing if that efficiency continues, if that ability to just be an overall playmaker continues. Asen Hansen has been fantastic so far this season, and so far in his career, really. When he steps out on the field, you expect good things to happen, and he's leading a Jones offense that could end up being one of the top scoring offenses in Class 2A1 this season. Lawton MacArthur, defensive back, and Arkansas commit Adam Austin is our next player to watch for Week 2. I mentioned it earlier that this matchup between Lawton Mac and Lawton High, the city championship on the line, Adam Austin should have a pretty significant role for the Highlanders, as whether it's his play as a significant, defensive back standout, one of the top DBs in the state at the safety position, or if he's coming up in the run game to help out in run defense. Adam Austin, one of the better players in the state. And earlier this spring, he was playing quite a bit on the offensive side of the ball, so he has the chance to be a playmaker on offense as well. Looking forward to seeing what happens with Adam Austin. He's committed to Arkansas. Like I mentioned, one of the best players, one of the best overall prospects in the state's 2026 class. A very aggressive, hard-hitting defensive player that could really kind of shut down the momentum that Lawton has so far early on in the season. Davis and Sulphur playing one of the top rivalry matchups this week. And Davis quarterback Dax Owens is a player to watch heading into the matchup against the Sulphur Bulldogs. Dax Owens, a 3-year starter at quarterback for the Davis Wolves. He leads that option attack. And, I talked about it earlier with Corey Cole, the head coach of Sulphur. You get lulled to sleep trying to defend the Bulldogs or trying to defend the Wolves. And then all of a sudden, Dax Owens breaks open for a 60-yard touchdown run or even further. Last year in the championship game, he had that game-changing kickoff return for a touchdown. So no matter where Dax Owens is on the field, he has the ability to change the game in a blink of an eye. He has perfect control of this Davis rushing attack. And like we mentioned, don't overlook his ability to hurt defenses with his arms, or with his arm at the right time. They know when to strike. So Dax Owens, certainly one of the more underrated players in the state of Oklahoma, but he's one of the best for sure. In our opinion, he helped lead them to a state title last year. He could lead them to another state title this year. The Owasso Rams are off to an 0-2 start, but Jaden Hall, their senior running back, has had a fantastic start to his senior season. And really, honestly, for him, it's simply he just picked up right where he left off last year. He was playing some of his best football at the end of last season. You go back to the state championship game against Bixby, he played outstanding. Even the week before that in the semifinals, he had the game-winning touchdown run in triple overtime against Jinx. So Jaden Hall has been playing really, really good football. Even this year against Bixby, this year against Jinx, even though the team got the loss, Jaden Hall looks really good. Now the Owasso Rams welcome in Sand Springs, so Jaden Hall trying to continue his momentum as one of the top running backs in Oklahoma, let alone in Class 6A1. Jaden Hall off to a fast start this season. And really, it's an interesting story with him because, before that playoff run last year, Jaden Hall was known as a guy who was splitting carries with two other running backs in that Owasso backfield. And now I think that you can make the argument that he's a marquee back in Oklahoma and can carry the ball 20 to 25 times if that's what's necessary for this Owasso offense. So Jaden Hall having a heck of a start to his senior season. We mentioned that Jinx game last week, and one of the standouts from the Trojans was Caleb Dillard, their junior standout offensively, defensively. I loved what I've seen from Dillard so far this season. We knew that he was one of the best safeties in the state from watching him the last 2 years, his freshman year at Lincoln Christian, his sophomore year last year at Jinx. But this offseason, we knew that Dillard was going to be used more on the offensive side of the ball, and what he could end up being this season for the Trojans as their leading wide receiver. He's been outstanding so far this season, whether it was last week against Owasso, the week 0 win over Edmonds Santa Fe. He is quickly turning into their top target, and he's one of the better overall athletes in the state because you take into account the fact that he can lead the team in receiving, be one of their top defenders on defense. He's also the team's punter. So in all three aspects of the game, Caleb Dillard has a significant impact. We mentioned that Davis-Sulphur game. For Sulphur, it's all about quarterback Cale Brakefield. Made his first start last week in the win over Washington. And, I wrote about this on Prep Redzone Oklahoma. It had to be a pretty fun night for Brakefield as he was facing his former team. He was one of Washington's leading tacklers last season. This year, he's QB1 for the Sulphur Bulldogs. He helped lead them to a huge 28-19 win over Washington last week, and now he takes his team into a huge rivalry game. And we mentioned Davis and how they run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. They are more than happy with taking 3 to 4 yards every snap, which limits what the other offense is going to be able to do. So Brakefield going to be a huge player to watch this week as his opportunities are going to be limited. His opportunities with the ball, if Davis goes on one of those patented drives that takes 9 minutes off the clock, which they've done it plenty of times over the last few decades, Brakefield and Sulphur's offense will have limited opportunities, limited possessions, and he has to make the most of them. Hominy, Malachi Harris. I mentioned that the Hominy Bucks have several young playmakers that I'm interested to follow. Malachi Harris is that guy. He's a sophomore who had a fantastic performance last week against Cleveland. And he's a guy, whether it's at running back, wide receiver, or even on the defensive side of the ball, he has the chance to be pretty special. He scored 4 touchdowns in their win last week over Cleveland. I'm expecting him to have another big performance this week against Pawhuska. Again, he's that offensive playmaker where it looks like, size-wise, he checks the boxes. Whether it's at receiver or running back, he knows how to impact the game. So he's a 2028 prospect that I would go ahead and start buying stock in, because he has the chance to be pretty special in that class of 2028. Vian, running back Mason Wright. Whenever the Wolverines are on the field, Mason Wright is always going to be one of the players to watch, and he got his senior season off to a solid start. And the beauty of it for Wright is he doesn't need that many touches. He proved that last year where, he would have a game where he only touched the ball 5 times and scored 4 touchdowns. He's the definition of a playmaker. He's the definition of a guy who's a threat to touch it every time, or he's a threat to score every time he touches the ball. And now Vian takes on Kiefer this week. They have a huge showdown with Pecola coming up next week, but Mason Wright focused on the task at hand. He had a huge game in that Pecola matchup a year ago. But before you can worry about that, you have to take care of business against Kiefer. In my opinion, Mason Wright is maybe the most criminally underrated prospect in Oklahoma. There's a lot of really underrated guys, but I've seen Mason Wright play for the last 3 seasons, and specifically, 2 or 3 times in person last year. He's one of the best players in the state. And I say that with full confidence. I don't understand why he's not being recruited more. I know there's quite a few kids that have that same question, but Mason Wright, in my opinion, is the most underrated prospect in Oklahoma, and he should have more opportunities to play at the next level than he currently has, because he's going to help whoever he ends up with. Newcastle running back TJ Bradford is our next player to watch. Newcastle looking to bounce back after a tough loss against Tuttle last week. TJ Bradford, he's a player that I've loved since his freshman year. Just whether it's offense, defense, running back, he's incredibly productive. Although Newcastle has had some new players emerge on the offensive side of the ball, and so Bradford hasn't needed to be a player that runs the ball, 25, 30 times a game, although he is capable of doing just that. He's also a standout on the defensive side of the ball. He's a player that I've covered since his freshman season, and I think I always lean to the offense, but he's been very good on defense as well at the cornerback position. So he comes from a very talented family. He's a talented player. Looking forward to seeing what he does as Newcastle takes on Blanchard on Friday night. Then you have finally our final player to watch, Union linebacker Tucker Cook. Fired up to see this guy because he had his breakout moment in the Jinx game last season. At this time last year, we didn't know much about Cook and the junior linebacker at that moment, and then they took on Jinx, and he absolutely dominated. The Union defense dominated as well, but it started with Tucker Cook. He was all over the field, had a huge performance in that win over Jinx, and now Union struggling out of the gate. They need that type of game-changing performance from Cook on the defensive side of the ball. All right, so that's a look at the players to watch heading into week 2. Now it's time to turn it over to you, the viewers, the readers, all of that, the followers on Twitter. Q&A time. We have a couple questions this week. This one is incredibly tough to answer. Whose streak gets snapped next? Obviously, this is coming off of Washington losing and seeing their 45-game winning streak come to an end. Who gets their streak snapped next, Carl Albert or Lincoln Christian? When it comes to 11-man football, Carl Albert has the longest active streak now with 41. Lincoln Christian right behind them with 30. Who loses first, Carl Albert or Lincoln? I'm going to go with Carl Albert, and I'm going to tell you why. They might not lose to another 5A team. They might go ahead and win another state championship. They take care of business against everybody. They took care of business last week in their season opener against Midwest City. They have Lawton Eisenhower this week. The rest of the 5A slate, including the playoffs, they might not lose. However, in week 3, they host Stillwater. And we just saw what happens what happened with Stillwater last week. They went on the road and took care of business against Union. So if Carl Albert's going to lose, my bet would be that they fall to the Pioneers in week 3, and then they could very well take care of business the rest of the way and win another state championship. So out of the two of them, Carl Albert or Lincoln Christian, Carl Albert faces the toughest opponent with Stillwater in the non-district schedule. Of course, they can face another tough opponent in the playoffs, whether it's Del City or a Guthrie rematch or whoever it ends up being. For Lincoln Christian, I think there's only one team in Class 3A that can beat them. I mean, honestly, Lincoln might lose this week to Shiloh Christian. We don't know. Lincoln could fall to Sulphur in a state championship rematch in December. So both of them, they're not locks to finish the season undefeated, but it wouldn't surprise me either. But I think out of the two, Carl Albert, watch out for the Pioneers next week at home. That could be when that streak gets snapped. Another question, and it's another tough one. What's more surprising, Union's 0-2 start or Muskoge's 0-2 start? Obviously, Union, both teams in that question have first-year head coaches. Union with Antonio Graham, Muskogee with Dale Condict. And, what's more surprising? I think it's Union. I think it's Union just because of the way they lost to Stillwater last week. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Now, if they lost to Stillwater last year in overtime, but it was a close game. I don't think them losing to Stillwater last week is what was surprising. It's the fact that they lost 41-15. I mean, that was the surprising thing. For Muskogee, I knew personnel-wise that they might take somewhat of a step back, despite the fact that they have a Hall of Fame head coach now. And they do have some new faces that moved in and transferred in this offseason. They're still pretty talented. They're still a team to watch in 6A2, but I thought that they would. Look, they've had the best quarterback in the state for the last 2 years. You lose him to graduation. He's now at Utah scoring touchdowns. Shout out Bird Ficklin, by the way. You don't get better by losing a player like that. So I thought they would take a bit of a step back. Their 0-2 start doesn't really surprise me. Union's 0-2 start, it surprises me a little bit more. So I'm going to go with Union, especially with the way they lost to Stillwater. That was more surprising here early on in the season. But I think both teams have plenty of time to turn it around. All right, on Thursday on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma, we will release our updated Player of the Year watch list. We'll add 3 more players to our Player of the Year watch list, and we have 3 fantastic additions this week, starting with Tuttle quarterback Cruz Campbell. Campbell turned himself into one of the best quarterbacks in the state last season. Last year, he threw 40 touchdowns with only 3 interceptions. We mentioned it a couple weeks ago on our Week 0 preview show, how Campbell, his production last year as a junior probably equaled the production from his freshman and sophomore years combined. His move from Southmore to Tuttle certainly benefited him as he helped lead the Tigers all the way to the state championship game. In my opinion, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the state, one of the best players in the state, and that's why he's been added to this week's edition of the Player of the Year watch list. Coming up after Cruz Campbell, another quarterback and an absolute playmaker, Broken Bow quarterback Graydon Howell. We talked about him last season quite a bit as he was in the middle of a breakout year. I've talked about him on this show and so far this season, talking about how he is the most electric quarterback in the state of Oklahoma. He had a fantastic performance last week against Durant. And for Hal, similar to a lot of the guys that are on this watch list, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when we added him. He was on the watch list last year. He's on it again this year. Had a fantastic performance against Durant last week. And so perfect time to add him after 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, over 100 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing. Completely electric at the quarterback position. And then rounding out the 3 new additions, no surprise here, Sulphur standout Maddox Mobley. I talked about him quite a bit over the weekend and early on this week, and even earlier in the show with Sulphur head coach Corey Cole. Maddox Mobley absolutely took that game over last week in the 3rd and 4th quarter. And you heard from Coach Cole nursing a little bit of an ankle injury, and so they kept him kind of quiet and limited in the first half because they knew they were going to need that late game push from him. And then when it was time to turn it on, he absolutely did. Just a dominant performance from Mobley and the rest of the Sulphur defense and some of the skill players on the offensive side of the ball, as well as Sulphur snaps Washington's 45-game winning streak. Maddox Mobley, in my opinion, like I said earlier, one of the best players in the state. He is the latest addition of the Player of the Year watch list. Now, finally, before we get out of here, we want to tell you what you can expect on Prep Red Zone Oklahoma. As I mentioned, our Player of the Year watch list, more of a breakdown on each individual player, will be added and published on Thursday. You can also take a look back at the week 0 watch list, the week 1 watch list, and the 3 players that were added from those weeks. We'll have links to those articles at the bottom of our week 2 watch list article. You will also be able to check out our first look Friday breakdown. On Friday, it'll be published around noon that day. We had our first one last week. And what the First Look Friday breakdown is, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're taking our first look at athletes across the state of Oklahoma. These are 5 players that I've never written about before, whether it's a guy who's having a breakout season already, a guy who I've known about for a little bit but just haven't had the chance to write about him, or a guy that you need to know about moving forward. First Look Friday comes out on Friday around noon. Overall, we'll also have coverage from 3 different games. On Thursday, I'll be at Edison as they host Collinsville. We'll have social media content. We'll have article content. We'll have video highlights, post-game reaction, interviews, stuff like that right here on the Prep Red Zone Oklahoma YouTube channel. On Friday, as I mentioned earlier, doing a doubleheader, starting the night at Broken Arrow as they host Mustang, and then I'm making my way over to Cassia Hall as they take on Metro Christian. Now, this is subject to change. It depends on how the games are going. If the Cassia Metro game turns into a bit of a blowout and Mustang Broken Arrow is close, I might just stay there. So it's all subject to change, but that's the plan for now. And again, we'll have coverage on social. We'll have coverage on the website. We'll have coverage right here on the YouTube channel. Over the weekend, we'll update the rankings, our week 3 rankings heading into week 3 in 6A1 all the way down to Class A2. Saturday night, we'll also have the week 2 roundup, breaking down all of the top outcomes from Thursday and Friday night. And then we'll finish the weekend coverage off with our week 2 top performers on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. And again, send in your top performer suggestions, nominations, stat lines, all that information to Prep Red Zone OK on Twitter. You can tweet at us. You can DM us. You can email me at michael@prepredzone.com. Get your top performer nominations in. Last week, we featured almost 30 different players. We want that number to continue to rise throughout the season. So big weekend ahead, big week of high school football ahead. My thanks goes out to Travis Hill, the head coach of the Broken Arrow Tigers, Corey Cole of the Sulphur Bulldogs, and Caleb Christian of the Hominy Bucks. And thanks to everybody who has been watching every single Wednesday the Prep Red Zone Oklahoma preview show for week 2 this week. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. All of our video content free right here on the Prep Red Zone OK YouTube channel, from the preview show to highlights. We'll have some more stuff throughout the season as well. But my thanks again goes out to the 3 coaches for joining us. Thank you for watching and following along. Enjoy the football on Thursday and Friday night, and we'll see you right back here on Wednesday one final time. I'm your host, Michael Knight, the director of Prep Red Zone Oklahoma. Enjoy the football, everybody.